Okay. Okay. Okay, so my name is Stuart Barnes. I'm from Cranfield University, and I'm here to talk today about Cranfield University itself and also the course that we run within our department at Cranfield. So the course that we're running is an MSc in Computational and Software Techniques in Engineering. And to begin with, I'll talk a little bit about the university itself, and then I'll move on to the course and some of the specific options in the course. So Cranfield University was founded in 1946 as an extension to the what is originally the Royal College of Aeronautics in the UK. And over the years, we have diversified into several other subjects. But really, they're all based around the idea of engineering and manufacturing and so on, and associated subjects. We've also introduced some other areas, such as we have a School of Management, which is very well thought of, and more recently we have a School of Health and some agricultural type of activities. So Cranfield itself is a postgraduate only university, so we don't have any undergraduates. We only teach at MSc level and PhD level. So that makes us a little bit different to a lot of the other universities in the United Kingdom. We have 3 campuses, soon to be 2 campuses. The first of which is the main one, which is at Cranfield itself, which is situated about 80 kilometres north of London. We have another campus nearby called Silso, and Silso campus is soon to be closed, so we will soon to be only 2 campuses. That originally was the agricultural type of activities, but they've been moved over to the main Cranfield campus now. And then the third campus is the one at Shrivenham, which is in the west of England. The nearest town is Swindon. And Shrivenham tends to deal with defence-related activities. So we have a contract with the UK government to provide those teaching facilities there. Cranfield itself, then, is, as I mentioned, located in the southeast part of the United Kingdom, and it's not a very well-known place geographically, but to give you some idea, if you were to draw a line between Oxford and Cambridge, we would be somewhere along that line about halfway. So on the slide there you can see Oxford, Cambridge, London, and we're roughly halfway along that blue line. So we have quite a lot of transport opportunities there in terms of getting around the United Kingdom. So it's a good place, good base, I should say, to explore the UK from. Now, being originally a Royal College of Aeronautics, we have our base, our main campus is in the middle of the countryside, really. So it's quite a self-contained kind of place. It's not in a city. But we have all the facilities that any other campus would have, and we have everything, I think, that students need in order to live. We also have an airport as well, if you're interested in flying. So you can take lessons if you feel the urge. But that's a hangover from our past in aeronautics. The airfield's still active, and we have lots of small companies providing training for that if you want. So Cranfield University campus then is just on the other side of the airfield from Cranfield, the Cranfield Village, where we get our name from. So Cranfield Village would be the nearest habitation, I guess, to the university campus. But we have the 2 other nearby towns, well, one town and one city, much more established places. So Bedford, to the east of Cranfield, is quite an old town, dating back from the Domesday Book, so 11th century, 10th, 11th century. And then in the other direction, we have a much newer town, a newer city called Milton Keynes, and that's much more from this century, in fact. So that's one of the new towns in the United Kingdom. So both of those places provide all the typical facilities you would expect, cinemas, theatres, and so on, bars, cafes, restaurants, that kind of thing. So having said that we live in the countryside, we want to provide as many facilities as possible. So we have all sorts of sports facilities, so squash courts, tennis courts, we have football fields, rugby fields, and so on. And we have cricket fields as well. And I've noticed that some of the students who come to the UK from Spain this year have taken up cricket. So we like to get our cultural stuff out there. We all have libraries and shops and so on. So there are restaurants and cafes and pretty much everything that you might expect on a campus. In addition, we have our equivalent of a students' union, which is a Cranfield Students' Association, which has a bar, has clubs and societies, there are live bands and so on. So there's a lot going on campus at any given time. In terms of accommodation on the campus, we offer a number of different types of accommodation, depending on what you're interested in, what your budget is, and so on and so forth. Accommodation can be quite tight because we have a fair number of students, so it's good if you're going to apply to Cranfield to apply as early as possible so that you can get your choices in for the accommodation as early as possible as well. If you decide that you don't want to live on campus, then there's plenty of accommodation off campus, either in the nearby village of Cranfield or further afield in Bedford or Milton Keynes. And a lot of students do take that option and then travel in either with their own transport or through public transport, buses and so on. In terms of facilities in the accommodation, we have, depending on what you opt for, either shared kitchens, or if you don't want to cook your own food, then there are cafes and so on, and that's all part of the cost, depending on which accommodation you choose. And also, there's all the typical things like data points, Wi-Fi, and so on, electricity, and so on. So, if you decide to live off campus, well, as I mentioned, we have these other places, Bedford and Milton Keynes, so there's a lot going on in both of those places. So of interest, museums, art galleries, bars, clubs, and so on. Milton Keynes itself is a significantly larger place. We have a large music venue called the Milton Keynes Bowl, which various musical acts and so on come perform at. And there's also facilities for, strangely enough, we have no mountains, but we can do skiing and snowboarding, tobogganing, rock climbing, all those kinds of things, shopping, nightlife, dining, and if you've still got time, some theatre as well. Further afield, there are good transport links to London, to Oxford, and to Cambridge. So if you want to visit some of these sort of historical, cultural places, then it's easy to do so from Cranfield. Very easy to get to these places from there. So what do we do at Cranfield? Well, as I mentioned, our history is really in engineering, and well, specifically in aerospace. So generally our activities are spread across the Cranfield and Shrivenham sites. So at Cranfield we specialise in 5 main areas: aerospace, engineering, manufacturing science, industrial science. We have bioscience, technology, and also a School of Management that's very well thought of. At our Shrivenham campus, as I mentioned, we have a Defence Management and Technology course which we run on behalf of the UK government, plus we also have some other areas that we of interest there, electronics, electro-optics, and mechanics and civil engineering. But generally the bulk of the activity in terms of, and certainly in terms of student numbers, is at Cranfield. We have a slightly unique situation at Cranfield because we are a postgraduate university only. Our funding from central government is actually somewhat smaller than in relation to other universities. So on the graph there we see that the UK government funding, the HEFCE funding, Higher Education Funding Council of England, is actually quite a small percentage. And that forces us really as an organisation to get our money from other sources, such as research grants and contacts with industry, or from tuition through continuing professional development, or through training at companies. So actual money from the government is quite small, but we have very strong links with industry as a result. So we are very much a research-led university, and our teaching reflects that. So as an example there, we're one of the top 5 research-intensive universities in the United Kingdom, and as a percentage of our income, the research income earned from UK industry as a proportion of total income is actually significantly higher than many of our fellow universities. So there's a real emphasis at Cranfield on building strong links with industry, and as such we have a technology park on campus where we have the likes of Nissan, which have their technology centre based there. We have Traffic Master, which is a UK traffic monitoring company, plus a number of other really engineering-based companies on campus. Most recently, we have introduced a relationship with Boeing and some other aerospace companies to investigate vehicle health monitoring. So again, that's an area of active interest for us. In terms of our students, we have quite a large mix of students. So I think the latest figures show us about half of the students come from the UK, half of them come from the EU, and half of them come from overseas, so outside the UK. Certainly on our courses, those figures are somewhat different, so we get a lot more students from the EU than perhaps from the UK. But generally speaking, Cranfield as a whole, we have those sort of proportion of students. So over 100 nationalities worldwide, which makes us the second most diverse university in the UK and the world. So it's an interesting place to study. You get to meet lots of different people from different backgrounds, and that in itself is part of the Cranfield experience. As mentioned earlier, Cranfield is the UK's only postgraduate-only university, and we teach at diploma, MSc and PhD level, so MSc taught courses or MSc by research courses as well. We've been offering double degree to European partners for some 20 years now. Specifically, our department have been involved for the last 16 years or more now with a French university, Estia, based in Biarritz. That was our first relationship. So we've been exchanging students for quite some time. In addition to that, it's worth mentioning that our School of Management is accredited as one of the top MBA programs in Europe, or in fact the world. And we try to make best use of their expertise by offering a management course as part of our MSc as well. In addition, we have been awarded the Queen's Award for Education for the last 2 years that it was offered. So we're quite proud of our achievements as a university. Obviously, the most important thing when you finish your university degree is will you get a job, and I think because of our strong links with industry, we're well recognised that the graduates that come out of Cranfield are very employable, and as a result, we have some 93% of students find employment within 6 months of leaving Cranfield, which makes us one of the top UK universities for graduate employment. To give some some perspective on our impact in engineering in particular, 1 in 10 UK postgraduate engineers was trained at Cranfield. So we feel that we've got a very strong relationship and strong background strong relationship with industry and strong background in engineering and the other activities that we do. So that's Cranfield as a whole. So I'd just like to move on to the MSc course that we offer as a department, which is the Applied Mathematics and Computing group. So the MSc that we offer is MSc in Computational Software Techniques and Engineering, and we offer that degree with 4 specialist options. So you can choose one of 4 of those options: either computer-aided engineering, digital signal and image processing, advanced computer environments and architectures, and software engineering for technical computing. So long titles, but essentially they're trying to teach you how to produce good software in each of these specific areas of interest. So If we have a quick look at the course structure, we find that, that we teach all 4 options. We teach a set of core modules, which are based firstly upon programming and software engineering, with the language of choice being C++ really for all 4 options. We teach visualizations and GUI design using OpenGL, MFC, Windows Forms, and so on. We have some maths in terms of computational methods, and also, as I mentioned before, we make best use of our MBA teaching facilities to teach a core module, Management for Technology. We feel that these guys are going to be able to teach this far better than we can, so we'll teach engineering and we'll let the School of Management teach the management. Of those 4 options, I'm just going to talk briefly about 2 of those options. One is the software engineering, which I'm personally involved with, and the other one is the digital signal and image processing. So the list there that you see on the screen is just a list of specialist modules. So if you choose to do the software engineering, then you'll be doing those 5 or 6 modules that are listed there. And I'll talk a little bit about the structure of the software engineering in a bit more detail in a little while. But suffice to say that really all 4 options follow similar paths in terms of the structure, just that the content is slightly different. The important thing then is for us is that, that we emphasize the practicality of what we're teaching. So we're trying to teach you engineering skills which you can go into the university, go into industry with at a later date, and really to hit the ground running, so that you're not wondering what all the different industry speak is. Hopefully you'll know what that is by the time you get there. So 50% of our MSc is taught, as in lectures, which is then assessed through exams and through assignments. And then 50% of the remaining 50% is assessment through a thesis project, an individual thesis project. Thesis project is either industrially sponsored, or it can be industrially sponsored, or will be related to research work within the department. So we've had sponsorship from a number of firms in the past, and we've had some good feedback, and students have often gone on to stay with those companies. As I mentioned before, that graduate employment prospects are very good, 93% of students within 6 months. What we're trying to really emphasize again with our MSc, and I guess with all MScs in Cranfield, but specifically for us, that we want to demonstrate how to do software development. We want you to understand how to do project management. We want you to learn presenting skills, design and technical writing. These are all good transferable skills which when you go into the jobs market, employers will be looking for. So past students that have come from our MSc program have been employed with a number of different companies. This is somewhat out of date now, I guess, but we have many new companies, and I'll enumerate some of those in a while. If you have any questions about our courses, then there's a number of places that you can find information. We have an online application form, although the actual way that you apply for your studying at Cranfield, you're probably best to contact your local Erasmus office first, rather than applying straight to the university. But in terms of information, we have web pages at that address, and we also have an email address of our course director, Peter Shearer, who you can email if you have any further questions. So we'd like to think that our courses are going to make you attractive to industry, and that's really what we want to emphasize here, is that hopefully at the end of this you will be able to get a job as soon as possible. And even in today's difficult climate, we're finding a strong take-up of students in industry. So I'm just going to show you now one of the options in a bit more detail, just so that you can see what it is that we do and how we do it. Now, I mentioned before that all 4 options on our MSc course have roughly the same structure, just the individual teaching modules will be somewhat different. So I'm going to focus on the software engineering course, basically because that's what I teach on, so I'm obviously biased. But I just want to go over some of the things that that the software engineering course offers you, and what you can expect to get from it by the end of by the time you've completed it. So, software engineering for technical computing is a specific application of software engineering to high-performance computing. At least that was the idea. But over the past few years, we find that those skills that we use for high-performance computing, things like programming for supercomputers, doing massively parallel programming, and so on, we found that those same core skills now are in great demand on just normal desktop computers, because those desktop computers now have these multi-core processors. We're also seeing a move into other architectures such as GPUs and other types of distributed computing such as cloud computing. So we want to give you a course which allows you to address programming and software development on all those environments. And it's at the end of this course, it's not just a technical numerical software that we hope that you'll be able to find a job in, but also just any kind of software development, because increasingly software developers are having to learn these skills. So the basic motivation, I guess, is to use parallel programming in order to develop applications on these multi-core CPUs, which are now in every computer pretty much. We can't rely on software clock increases to get better performance. Now we have to actually program the CPUs themselves to take advantage of the extra cores that they give us. So that's a specific skill that you have to learn, and it's not something that you can just press a button and hope that it will do it for you. You've got to understand the relationships between your programming and the hardware on which you're running it. So we try to give you some experience in some industry standard programming frameworks such as OpenMP and multi-threading, explicit threads, either P threads or Win32 threads. And these kinds of skills are really applicable, like I said, to all types of software development, not just numerical software development, which might have been the case in the past. So programming for CPUs then is one aspect, and another aspect of what we do is harnessing new technologies such as graphical processing units. And we use these hardware architectures to implement general purpose type computation. And the reason why we do that is that graphical processing units have huge numbers of parallel processors. So we might be looking at 4, 8, 12, 16, maybe even 80 cores on a CPU, but on a GPU we can be looking at least 200, maybe 500 different processing cores. So if we can move our application into a parallel environment, such as a GPU, we can expect to get significant increases in performance in comparison with the CPU. It's never that simple. It takes a fair amount of effort to get the best possible performance from a GPU. And our course hopes to show you not only how to program on a GPU, which is relatively straightforward, but how to optimize your applications to get the best possible performance, which is not so straightforward. So we have typically we might have if I can find an example. Typical sort of thing that we get from, in this case, the CUDA software development kit is a simulation of particles, in this case smoke particles. And the reason for showing you this is a standard demonstration from NVIDIA's development kit. But the reason to show you this is that if I was to try to do this on the CPU, particularly on my fairly low-spec laptop, I wouldn't get anything like the number of frame rates or the performance that I'm getting there. So each particle is being individually modeled there, which gives it a much more realistic effect. So these kinds of applications are the things that we're trying to teach you how to write, essentially. So talk about perhaps slightly more traditional types of parallel computing, which is distributed computing. And again, we offer a course in large-scale computing platforms such as clusters and supercomputers and so on. So this is generally using the MPI framework to do this. And these types of programs allow us to communicate across hundreds or maybe thousands of different processors, allow us to get a massively parallel application up and running. And we have our own sort of supercomputer at Cranfield, and we have access to that, and it's a good environment if you want to learn how to develop applications on supercomputers. A more recent development, of course, is cloud computing. Again, a distributed computing platform, but with really some quite interesting opportunities for programming applications. Those applications can be commercial applications, or they can be scientific or technical applications. And we're actively looking into how best we can use these platforms for our own research, but also we feel that it's a good opportunity, a good time to start learning how to build applications on cloud platforms. So one of the big differences, I think, between programming on cloud platform compared with some of the other parallel environments that we looked at is that you need to have a very broad range of programming disciplines, programming skills. So from things such as web services, HTML design, all the way down to MPI, shell scripting, systems programming, security programming, and all the way right down to virtualization and understanding how to implement virtual machines. So we run a module for cloud computing, and we make use of a UK National Grid Service cloud computing platform to do that. So you get some real hands-on experience there on cloud computing. So what's the format of our typical format of our courses? Well, we usually use lectures, lab-based training. We have a group project, and as I mentioned, 50% of the course is individual thesis projects. So if I just give you a sort of a quick heads up on the lectures, and typically for the software engineering, I mentioned earlier that we have these core lectures, the software engineering, computational methods, and so on. So everybody does those. If you're on the software engineering track, though, you'll then do the modules on the right-hand side there. So some advanced software engineering, and then various modules which address the technologies and application areas that I mentioned previously. We can look at this rather than by module, by subject. And just to give you a sort of a walkthrough of where we try to get you from the beginning to the end. So we start off teaching you the fundamentals, which is software engineering and C++ programming. We then get you to apply those fundamental skills to new technologies, perhaps new to you, such as multi-threaded programming, GPU programming, distributed computing, and so on. We then introduce some applied topics, cloud computing and visualization, and see how they apply to the areas that you've been working on. And then towards the end of the teaching period, we ask you to participate in a group project, which is often, has been most recently, implementation of scientific workflows. Once you've finished that, then you're asked to join the thesis project, choose your thesis project and spend 4 or 5 months working on that. And thesis projects can fall into a number of different areas there. As you can see from that list. So really there's quite a lot of scope for the type of thesis project that you can undertake, but they generally have a theme of working on parallel applications in these different parallel environments. So the practical labs then, we emphasize hands-on learning. Pretty much all of the courses have a classroom part and a lab-based part, and almost all the courses also have an assignment which is based on that lab-based part of the course. So we're very keen that you have a hands-on experience of these technologies rather than sort of sitting in the classroom and me telling you about them. We'd much rather you got out there and gave it a go yourself. The group project, which I mentioned, generally works in the sense that we give you a problem to solve. We split you up into three groups or 4 groups or however many groups according to how many students there are, and we just say, well, go away and solve the problem. And we'll have a conversation at regular intervals to see how you're getting on. But really the emphasis is with you as a group, and to be able to interact with other groups and to be able to communicate within your group and apply different technologies to solve that problem. So the group project's quite an important part of our course, and all 4, I believe, all 4 options introduce some form of group project of different themes, but generally along the same lines, in that you have to solve a real-world problem. So typically, for example, we have had in previous years a group project to introduce or design airfoil optimization and to automate the what we call design optimization, automate that process of stringing together multiple applications and pushing the data through those applications in an automated fashion. Quite often we'd have to do this manually, which can be very time-consuming. And the other problem, of course, is that we might want to use different computational platforms, and there are all sorts of issues of security and so on. So what we ask the students to do is to go away and, rather than have all the applications run on a single computer at once, to come up with some way of moving that that workflow from a single computer to multiple platforms and have arbitrary applications running on arbitrary platforms, and to organize a communication between those components. And the advantage of doing that is that we can have each program run on the most appropriate computational platform. So the flow calculation, for example, is very computationally intensive, and therefore we probably want to run it on a very large computer. Maybe the shape mesh is not so computational intensive, so you might want to move it elsewhere. But what it requires you to do is to understand the relationship between all these different platforms and to find a way of making it work, basically. So moving on to the final part, which is the thesis projects, really just to give you some idea of the type of projects that we've run in recent years. These are by no means an exhaustive study, but they do give you some overview of the types of things that we like our students to look at. The three types here, we've got multi-threaded or stream computing applications. So this is GPU or general purpose GPU programming, either through n-body applications, or so we have some image processing applications such as feature tracking and so on and so on. We have a number of projects recently in using distributed computing, either using MPI to implement parallel versions of existing sequential applications that we use within the department, or using App Engine, Google App Engine, or Amazon Web Services to implement parallel versions, again, of existing applications. We've also done some performance testing work on some of these platforms to see what they're appropriate to be used for. So it's an interesting area. And finally, the software engineering part, although it's in the title, I haven't really talked a lot about it, but the software engineering part, we're interested in various modes of static analysis and testing. So a number of projects for code visualization, coverage analysis, and so on have been done over the last few years. So what should you get after you come out of our course? Well, you're going to be familiar with standard practices used in industry, we hope, that you've developed robust software and you have experience of doing that on several different platforms. Importantly, I think for getting a job, you will have worked in a team and you'll have understood how to communicate with other members of your team and to communicate between teams. We think that's very important. And also completed a thesis project which really demonstrates self-discipline and motivation. And really these are the skills we feel that industry are looking for. And we've had some good feedback from students, former students, to that effect. Career opportunities, well, I've had students go to some of these companies in the last few years and done very well there. So there's good opportunities. These are not necessarily technical computing, numerical computing, or scientific computing companies are actually standard software development companies. So it's possible to go into normal software engineering application development after doing this course. Alternatively, there's always research. So if you want to carry on with a PhD program, we've had several students successfully make the transition to academic research instead. Okay, I think that ends my talk. So if you have any questions, please ask away.